"I'll knock him out in the first round." The phrase came out clean, without hesitation, into the referee's microphone during the official face-off. 4,000 people heard it, and 4,000 people, to varying degrees, laughed. It wasn't a unified laugh. It was a wave. It started in the VIP section, where Tyler Marsh's sponsors were sitting with laminated name tags and logo-printed plastic cups. Then it reached the center stands. Then the general admission section, where someone repeated the phrase to a neighbor who hadn't heard it clearly. And that neighbor laughed, too. The live broadcast commentator turned to the camera with a restrained smile and said only, "Well, at least he's confident." The co-commentator responded with a pause that said more than any words. Tyler Marsh didn't laugh. Worse, he didn't react. He stood with his arms slightly away from his body, eyes fixed on a point above Marcus's head, as if the statement hadn't come close enough to warrant a response. Marcus didn't look away. To understand what happened in that gym that night, you need to know what none of those 4,000 people knew. You need to step into a storage locker room in the basement of Lakefront Arena 3 days before the fight, at 11 o'clock at night, when a phone vibrated on a kitchen table in Gary, Indiana. Derek Holt, promoter. The voice of someone doing you a favor by calling. "I need an opponent for Marsh on Saturday." The original guy hurt his shoulder. "Are you in or out?" Marcus was silent for a moment. Not out of hesitation. "I'm in." Holt hung up without another word. No thanks, no good luck. Nothing to suggest that Marcus was a human being, and not a spare part. He was 29 years old and had a record that no one in any of the city's betting pools had bothered to study. He grew up in Gary in a row house with windows that didn't seal properly in the winter. His father, Earl Webb, worked the night shift at a foundry and died of a heart attack when Marcus was 16, on an ordinary day, during an ordinary shift, without any warning. The gym where Marcus learned to fight was in the basement of a Baptist church, with a sandbag swinging from the ceiling on a bicycle chain and a mirror with a diagonal crack in the corner. It was a mirror just like that one he was looking into now. Calvin Price stood against the wall, arms crossed. 58 years old. He'd never had a champion. He'd never promised anything beyond an open door early in the morning. It was Calvin who called 2 days after Ray Dunlap, a gym coach with enough of a reputation to attract scouts, a man who'd trained Marcus for 4 years, cut him off in a 3-minute conversation. "You don't have what it takes. It's not about effort. It's about what you have or don't have." 2 months later, Dunlap had a 19-year-old prospect and a sponsor. Marcus had Calvin's number and no other calls to make. At the bottom of the bag, folded in half like a note, was a photo. Earl Webb, 41 years old, standing on the sidewalk outside the foundry in his work uniform. Smiling sideways, slightly crooked, the way people smile when someone points a camera at them without warning. The light was bad. The angle was low. But it was the only photo where his father looked completely like himself. No pose, no self-consciousness. Just a man on a sidewalk, still unaware that he had only 2 years left. Marcus folded the photo and put it in the inside pocket of his shorts without looking at it again. Calvin spoke. "Did you sleep?" "A little." From the hallway came the sound of the announcer calling the fighters. Marcus slowly clenched his fist, felt the pressure along his knuckles, and stood up. The access corridor smelled of damp concrete and liniment. Marcus walked down it with Calvin 2 steps behind. No music, no entourage, none of the elements that turn an entrance into a spectacle. Just 2 men in a dimly lit corridor following cardboard signs taped to the wall. On the other side of the gym, Tyler Marsh was already entering. Marcus couldn't see, but he could hear. The difference was physical, a wave of sound that started low and grew until it pressed against the walls. Marsh's fans responded as fans do when they confirm what they already believed before entering. When Marcus walked through the side doors, the announcer read his name with the inflection of someone filling out a form. A few people clapped out of politeness. A child in the front row asked his father aloud who that was. The father shrugged. Marcus walked through the human corridor to the ring without looking to the sides. Calvin climbed the steps behind him. In the corner, he adjusted his mouthguard, checked his gloves one last time, and then did something he didn't usually do before fights. He placed both hands on Marcus's shoulders and waited for eye contact. "You know what's in here," that's all he said. He tapped Marcus's chest twice lightly with his knuckles. "They don't know." "But you do." Marcus nodded once. The referee called both fighters to the center for final instructions. It was the first time Marcus and Marsh had been less than a meter apart. Marsh was 2 centimeters taller and carried the posture of someone who'd never had to prove anything outside the ring. Shoulders back, chin slightly raised, gaze fixed on a point beyond Marcus, as if the space in front of him were simply empty. The referee finished his instructions. He asked the fighters to shake hands. That's when the ring reporter shoved his microphone between them for the final pre-fight question. "Marcus, any words before the first round?" And Marcus spoke. "I'll stop him in the first round." The reporter blinked. Marsh finally looked at him, not with anger, but with the expression of someone who'd been interrupted by something he didn't consider relevant. Laughter began in the VIP section and swept through the arena in waves. The broadcast commentator turned to the camera with a restrained smile. The co-commentator paused for 4 seconds before responding. Derek Holt, in the production booth, glanced at the assistant beside him and said under his breath that at least the last-minute replacement had made a headline. Marcus returned to the corner without reacting to the laughter. He sat down on the stool. He looked at his own gloves for a moment. Calvin said nothing. In the third row of the floor section, slightly to the left of center, a man in a gray coat with a press pass hanging around his neck uncrossed his arms when Marcus spoke, and crossed them again when the laughter began. Marcus didn't see him. He was looking at his gloves. The bell rang. If this story has already grabbed you, if you felt the weight of that hallway and that laughter, subscribe to the channel. There's still plenty more to come. The bell hadn't finished ringing when Marsh moved. Not hurriedly, with precision. He crossed the ring in 4 steps with the economy of someone who'd done this 19 times and found no reason to change a thing. The right jab landed twice in the first 8 seconds. Light, testing weight and reaction time the way a hand tests the water's temperature before getting in. The arena exhaled with satisfaction. Marcus absorbed the jabs and moved sideways. He wasn't watching Marsh's hands. He was watching his shoulders, the way the left one shifted a fraction before the right-hand jab, the way his feet paused mid-step when he was gauging distance. Earl had taught the same principle in different words, in a backyard in Gary on summer afternoons with the orange sky over the foundry smoke. Don't watch what a man does. Watch what he's about to do. Marsh landed a clean straight at the 22-second mark. Marcus's head snapped back. The arena responded with the sound fans make when they see confirmation. Not surprise, confirmation. The broadcast booth said something Marcus didn't hear and didn't need to hear. Calvin was crouched at the edge of the ring with his hands on the ropes. He said nothing. Marsh landed 2 more jabs in the next 10 seconds. Technical, patient. The kind of boxing that wins decisions and impresses judges. The arena had settled into a rhythm of moderate approval, the comfort of watching something unfold exactly as expected. Marcus rolled with the second jab and felt the distance between them recalibrate in his own body. Not a thought, a physical fact. The space between Marsh's right shoulder and his chin as the jab extended, the way his lead foot dragged 2 centimeters as he reset his guard after combinations. Something small, repeated, consistent. The kind of thing that only becomes visible after you've taken enough punishment to stop defending and start reading. In the third row, the man in the gray coat was leaning slightly forward. Arms crossed, the posture of someone waiting for confirmation of something he's already decided to believe. Marcus scanned the audience with a quick flick of his head, and his face registered something. Not immediate recognition, but the kind of familiarity the body feels before memory names it. Marsh threw a 3-punch combination. Jab, straight, hook. Marcus absorbed the jab, dodged the straight, and felt the hook graze his left eyebrow. Not a cut. Enough pressure to register. Enough to confirm something about the timing of Marsh's hook. He shifted his weight forward as he finished. A moment of imbalance after each 3-punch sequence. A moment was enough. Marcus had less than 30 seconds until the end of the round. He didn't know the exact count. He felt the round the way Earl had taught him to feel a conversation. Not word for word, but as a shape. And the shape of this round was closing in on a single point. Marsh loaded up on the right straight. Marcus saw the shoulder. What would you do in that moment? With everything that man in the third row represented, arms crossed, waiting to be vindicated. Write it here in the comments. I want to know. The numbers on the clock read 1:09:02 when Marcus let Marsh's right straight pass 3 centimeters to the right of his head. He didn't dodge with his feet. He stood still and let the fist slice through the air to his right, felt the shift in the wind at his ear. And in that split second, before Marsh regained his balance, before the arm came back, before anyone in those 4,000 seats understood what was about to happen, Marcus already knew. Marsh's left shoulder had opened up. Not by much. 2 centimeters. Maybe 3. The kind of opening that doesn't exist in any highlight reel, that no commentator calls out. That's only visible to someone who spent 11 years learning to read what a body is about to do before it does it. Marcus planted his left foot. He twisted his waist and unleashed the left straight. It wasn't the hardest punch he'd ever thrown. It was the most precise. It rose slightly along the jawline, connecting at the exact spot below Marsh's right jaw, just as his neck was still unprotected by the movement of his extended arm. The sound was crisp. Unlike the other punches in the fight, those had the muffled sound of the glove against the guard. This one sounded like something that hit exactly where it was meant to. The clock read 0:58. Tyler Marsh went down. Not collapsing. His knees buckled first, then his right hand touched the canvas. Then his body rolled to the side. The entire sequence lasted less than 2 seconds, but unfolded with a kind of slowness that only exists when an entire arena stops breathing at the same time. The referee stepped in. He began the count. The arena fell silent for 2 full seconds. Not the silence of a pause. The silence of 4,000 people processing something for which they had no category. Tyler Marsh, undefeated in 19 fights, 14 by knockout, never knocked down, had his right glove on the canvas and his eyes trying to find the fixed point that coaches teach you to look for when the ground moves. In the broadcast booth, the commentator said nothing for 3 seconds. When he spoke, his voice had a different tone. Not the professional tone of someone describing what he expected to see, the tone of someone describing what he can't believe he's seeing. In the third row, Ray Dunlap uncrossed his arms. Marcus stepped back to the neutral corner with his hands raised, eyes on the referee, breathing controlled. He didn't look at Dunlap. He didn't look at Calvin. He didn't look at the VIP section where Marsh's sponsors had been standing, unsure whether they should sit back down. He looked at Marsh. Not with anger, not with triumph. With the focus of someone who spent 11 years preparing for a single moment and is now simply in it, present, needing nothing more. The count reached 8. Marsh got to his feet. The referee checked his eyes, checked his guard, asked if he was okay. Marsh nodded. The bell signaling the end of the round rang 14 seconds later. Marcus returned to his corner and sat down. Calvin placed his hands on his knees without saying a word. The arena was still trying to decide what the right sound was for what it had just witnessed. If this comeback gave you chills, if you felt the weight of that 2-second silence, hit the like. It helps us keep telling stories like this. The fight ended in the 3rd round by technical decision. Marsh came back more guarded in the 2nd, more defensive in the 3rd, and when the referee stopped the fight at 2:47 of the 3rd round, after a flurry that left Marsh leaning against the corner with no answer, the arena processed the result with the same uncomfortable silence of those caught believing in the wrong thing. Marcus stood in the center of the ring with heavy arms and still ragged breathing. The referee raised his wrist. He didn't raise his other arm. He stood still, his eyes on the canvas for a moment. Not out of performative humility, but the way someone stands still when something big has happened and the body hasn't yet found the right gesture to respond. Calvin climbed the ropes. He placed his hands on either side of Marcus's face without saying a word. He just stood there for a moment, his thumbs on his cheekbones, his eyes locked with his. The gesture of a man who opened a door years ago without promising anything, and now stands on the other side of it. In the exit hallway, the difference was physical. At the entrance, 2 hours earlier, there had been just 2 men walking down a dimly lit hallway. Now there was a photographer, a TV producer, and Derek Holt, who appeared with an outstretched hand and a smile that hadn't been there when Marcus entered. Marcus shook the hand without stopping. In the dressing room, the same storage room with a bench and a cracked mirror, Calvin sat facing him while Marcus slowly unwound the bandages. Neither of them spoke for a while, the kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled because it already contains everything it needs to contain. It was Calvin who spoke first. His father would have stood up. Marcus didn't answer right away. He kept unwinding the last bandage, rolling it up carefully as if the gesture demanded attention. Then he put his hand in the inner pocket of his shorts and pulled out the photo. Earl Webb, 41 years old, on the Foundry sidewalk, smiling sideways without knowing anyone was taking his picture. Marcus stared at it for a moment he couldn't measure. Not with longing, exactly, with something closer to recognition. The feeling of finally letting go of something he'd carried for a long time and confirming it had reached the right destination. "You would have stepped into that ring," he said in a low voice. "Not for Calvin." Calvin heard him and didn't reply. Some moments don't need an active witness. Just someone who stays. 3 days later, the phone vibrated with a number Marcus recognized before reading the name. Ray Dunlap. Marcus stared at the screen long enough for the call to go to voicemail. Then he put the phone back on the kitchen table. He stared at it for a few more seconds. Not with anger, not with satisfaction. With the expression of someone who had waited a long time for a moment and discovered, when it arrived, that he no longer needed it the way he thought he did. Dunlap didn't leave a message. Marcus finished his coffee. If this story really touched you, consider supporting it with a super thanks, or subscribe now so you don't miss what comes next. 2 weeks later, the fight video had 3,200,000 views. A producer from Chicago sent a message. A promoter from Las Vegas sent a message. Derek Holt sent a message with a proposal that used the word opportunity 4 times, without ever specifying anything concrete. Marcus replied to 2 of them and took 3 days to respond. Not out of strategy, but because there were other things that needed attention first. Life in Gary hadn't changed the way movies suggest lives change after victories. The row house still had windows that didn't seal properly in the winter. The corner market still closed at 10. Marcus still woke up at 5:45 a.m. because that was when his body woke up regardless of the alarm, and Calvin's basement still smelled of old leather and rubber flooring and the kind of honest effort that has no glamorous scent at all. But there was one thing different. It was small and almost invisible and had no exact name. It was the way he would walk into the basement early in the morning and see the light on and Calvin already there. That constant, drama-free presence of a man who simply opened a door during a difficult time and never asked for anything in return. There was something about that sight that Marcus could now take in a way he hadn't before, as if the victory had cleared away some internal noise that had been preventing him from feeling the real weight of what he already had. Earl's photo stayed on the nightstand from that week on. Unframed, just propped against the lamp, still folded in half, slightly creased from the sweat of a fight. Marcus no longer put it in his shorts pocket before training. He didn't need to. He already knew where it was. The following month went like this. Training, coffee, messages answered little by little, Gary being Gary outside the window. Nothing out of the ordinary. Exactly as Marcus wanted it, at least for now. There was something valuable in the ordinariness of those weeks that he didn't want to cut short. One Saturday morning, Calvin opened the basement earlier than usual. There was a boy of about 12 sitting on the sidewalk outside with a backpack on his lap, the son of a woman from the church congregation. Someone had mentioned that he came from a difficult home situation and liked boxing without ever having actually trained. Calvin opened the door without asking anything and let the boy in. Marcus was just arriving when he saw the boy standing in the middle of the basement looking at the punching bag with the expression of someone who'd never been in a place like this and doesn't quite know what to do with his own body. The expression of someone who'd stood on the sidewalk looking through the window until someone opened the door. Marcus hung up his bag, wrapped his bandages, and walked over to the boy. "What's your name?" The boy said his name quietly. "Have you ever trained before?" He shook his head. Marcus held out his open hands in front of the boy. "It's okay. This is how you start. Some people spend their whole lives building in the dark. No camera, no audience, no one confirming that what they're doing matters. Earl Webb did that. Calvin Price did that. And at some point, Marcus couldn't quite pinpoint. He'd started doing the same. Not as a sacrifice, but as the most natural thing in the world. If you recognize someone in this story, someone who built something in silence and planted that something inside you without ever asking for credit, then you know this was never a story about boxing. Thank you for sticking with me this far. Seriously, stories like this only exist when there are people willing to sit down, listen, and let it sink in. You're that kind of person. If this story resonated with you, watch the next video too. It goes even deeper.